And as he prays, "O Lord, open his eyes so he may see." It says, "Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes. And he looked and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha." Can you imagine? It's like, when did these guys get here, right? I mean, we were just surrounded. All of a sudden, we don't have anything to fear. I mean, now I see what you're saying. I don't know when they got here, but they're here now. And there's a confidence, I'm sure, that would have welled up in the young man. Sometimes, like when you're scared, but then you realize that you're not alone, and all of a sudden your chest puffs out a little bit. You're like, okay, we can do this. Nothing's changed except our perspective's changed a little bit. The reality is that when we see what God is doing in our lives, when we're able to look at it with our spiritual blinders off, all of a sudden the situation that we're in, we begin to look at it differently. How many times have we looked at the opposition, whether it was something coming against our family or something coming against our churches or something coming against our very life, and we thought, there's no way I could ever handle that. I mean, it's going to overwhelm me. It's going to just envelop me. I mean, we may as well give up. Where's the white flag? But all of a sudden, when God gives us a vision that we're not alone, that He is with us, and He'll never leave us or forsake us, all of a sudden, all the enemies that come against us, they pale in comparison to the God that we know is for us. And there's a difference in our eyesight. We look at things differently. See, I believe that's what the power of prayer can do. And there's an excitement that rolls up. There's a steadfastness that's there. All of a sudden our chest brings out a little bit, and we realize that no weapon formed against me shall prosper, that the gates of hell cannot prevail when God is on our side. And for some of us in the church, what I believe the greatest prayer that we could pray is, God, just give me the eyesight to see that which you see. We got to go here. Okay, Acts chapter 12. It says, it was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. And when he saw that this pleased the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the feast of the unleavened bread. Now pay attention to what's taking place here, because as the church is just being formed, as it's new in its infancy, and as people are coming to Christ, all of a sudden Herod is one who says, we're going to stop this. We're going to stop this foolishness. And he has James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword, and he sees that it pleases the Jews. And so then he proceeds. It's like, okay, well, then we're on the right track, right? This is how we're going to stop this movement of God. We're going to kill off their leaders. Now think if the church today, if our leaders were rounded up and began to get put to death, what would we do as a church? It says he had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. And when he saw that this pleased the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the feast of the unleavened bread. And after arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squadrons of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. And the speaker at that time said, the church in the midst of persecution, the church in the midst of their leaders being put to death, that they stopped everything that they were doing, and it says that they just prayed. There wasn't time for cute sermons. There wasn't time for worship services. It says they just prayed and they called upon God. Because they knew that God was the only one who was going to be able to fix this problem. They were in the thousands at that point. They could have tried, they could have tried political realms. They didn't do that. They could have dismissed it with their theology. Well, God gives, He takes away. Peter's in prison. Goodbye, Peter. But it says that their church was earnestly praying. God, we don't know what to do, but God, would you do something? Would you send something? Would you break Peter out of prison? God, would you stop it? That which is taking place. Church, we've lost our dependency upon God so oftentimes in our lives. He says, the night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. And suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. You know, when people pray, God sends something from heaven. And isn't that what we need? And there's a difference. There's a difference when God is present and when He does something. And when He moves in such an undeniable way that you just sit back and you go, I don't know what that was, but it was definitely God. When people pray, God sends something from heaven, but that's not all He does. It says that He struck Peter on the side and He woke him up. You see, when people pray, God wakes up sleeping people. And there are people asleep in our lives. You know it and I know it. There's some who are asleep in our church services, and it's not a literal sleep. I mean, they're keeping their eyes open, right? But they're asleep to the eternal things of God. They're asleep to this relationship with the Father. They're asleep to the reality that God desires to meet with them and to pray with them, to abide with Him. The angel said to Peter, quick, get up. And the chains fell off Peter's wrists. You mean his earthly problem was solved by a spiritual being? Yes, that's exactly what I mean. The angel said to him, put on your clothes and sandals, and Peter did so, and wrap your cloak around you and follow me. And the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. And they passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city, and it opened for them all by itself, and they went through it. And when he had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. And then Peter came to himself and said, now I know without a doubt that the Lord sent His angel and He rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were anticipating. You see, when people pray, people are set free. They're rescued. That early church, I mean, I just can't imagine. They gather and they're supposed to eat and they're supposed to break bread together and they're supposed to teach one another. And this day they said, we don't have time for that. Peter's in prison, we got to pray.